Good morning, people. Here in Great Britain, the weather today is 7 degrees Fahrenheit. The air quality will be very smoggy, as it's been all week, along with some fog.
Today, we will be discussing the living conditions of specifically women and children, along with their injuries obtained at work, and how masters and watchers treated the workers. We also will be having a special guest of one of the women who in the union who fought for their rights at work and outside of it.
Okay, first topic today is going to be child labor and women later, but we're not going to get to that quite yet. We're going to get to that in our next segment when we are with a woman herself that was in the factories working alongside, seeing the children, seeing how her personal struggles were. But before we start with that, let's get into child labor.
Child labor. Okay, so pretty much children went through a lot of things that most children should not have to go through.
Yeah.
Pretty much like really bad injuries were like to the point where their skin would be ripped off of their limbs, like
Yeah, the muscle too.
the like fingers were getting cut off because of the dangerous machinery.
Bones were just shattered, man. It was horrifying.
Horrifying.
Also, a doctor from this time named Dr. Ward also confirmed how brutal these injuries were because he had to be the doctor for these patients, the children who worked at factories who were all affected by the factory's machines and how they shattered their bones, ripped their skin and ripped the muscle and cut fingers and everything. So you want to add on maybe to like how much more they were affected outside of maybe just the injuries, you know?
The long hours would do like really bad effects on their posture and stuff.
Yeah,
making
also the
them-
lungs they would get because some kids would be working in coal mines, so they would get their lungs all messed up by what they would breathe in the coal mine, so that also messed it up.
Yes, like their lungs would be messed up and their posture, like they'd be like hunchbacks because of how much they were hunched over and like doing work and like lifting heavy things.
Yeah, and then on top of that, with like they would not have access to all the workable clothes. You could say maybe some of them wouldn't have shoes. Their shirts and pants or whatever they wore was all ripped, and it was not something that could help protect them if anything were to happen. Just I don't know, just in general. And it really did suck. And then let's also talk about how like the masters and the watchers really did stuff on them. Yeah, you know how like with any little tiny thing maybe the kids did wrong, like for example being late, maybe not doing something right in the factory while they're working, they just get hit for a reason that's not really their fault. They're just kid, man, you know?
The kids, they didn't know like any better, and the masters didn't really let them learn. They more just like punished them for things that they didn't even know were wrong.
And talking about learning too, they had no education. Like they weren't able to learn anything. I mean, maybe sooner than later, there would be stuff that would pass, like acts that would be passed to help get their education and put their education first. And so yeah, they would not have education though. They would just have to work all day, just go home, sleep, work, just like nothing. Like they were almost slaves, which was also spoken by many people at the time, looking at the child labor and seeing how worse it is.
Their growth was also stunted, like their growth stopped because of like the heavy things being carried.
Oh my goodness. Have you heard of the steam engine created by James Watt? You know that old-looking guy, the guy that looks like Gargamel for the Smurfs? Yeah, him. He is the creator of the steam engine. Now, let me fill you in a little bit about the steam engine. The engine was an engine that improved the production and technology and allowed the creation of better and smaller engines, or to power a lot, or to power something big. This invention was designed to be used in factories and to power machinery of variety of types. Oh, and also I can't forget to add the steam engine allowed many other machines to become about. This helped with removing the water from the mines more faster and productive, and allowing a quicker removal of other minerals in these waters. allowing the factory to not have to be near the river, allowing them to be anywhere they want. And it was more reliable due to the water and wind from removing the water to power the factories, which was so unreliable.
Okay, now we're going to be talking about is diseases. So diseases spread, just like in our last story, how pollution affected the water and such. Disease also, it just spread rapidly. And this was the cause of contamination in the water because no filtration system was changed from like the human compost and all that and the water that we drink. So they would all just end up washing into each other and going together, and which created diseases. And these diseases consisted of were smallpox, typhus, and tuberculosis, which were all the consequences because of the bacteria from the compost and all such going into the water, in which then the people drank, and it just kept spreading and spreading, usually because the reason was because everybody was living in these tenements, which caused all their compost and all that to go into the water filtration system. So many were affected because they were all together in these tenements. While the rich were luckily able to get away from this because they were able to move far away from all this tenements in these cities, and because they were so rich, they were able to have houses and land and such far away from there, which caused less diseases to spread, which caused less deaths overall.
Women and children suffered with horrible conditions in the factory environments. Some examples of what they went through were stunted growth because of bad posture and long hours, and injuries due to the very unsafe environments. A doctor of this time confirmed how brutal these injuries were, such as skin being stripped down to the bone and occasionally small limbs being cut off by the dangerous machinery. Children were fired right on the spot within being injured, and no wages were given or medical attention.
We will now be having our guest speaker speaking. Hi, I'm a lady from the Union, and my experience in the Industrial Revolution was extremely hard, especially because when I worked in the factory, they treated women very differently. They treated us as if we were of different value as men in the workplace and were often paid less than men because we were women. Us women faced discrimination. We even still needed to cook and clean and be normal housewives, taking care of the children, and oftentimes we continued to work and be unpaid. Our conditions of work were very difficult and brutal. We also had to leave our children while we worked. At least we had an effect on women's rights when we protested, so our rights began to increase and we started to be treated more equally. Also, idealized the middle-class woman as a mother who stayed at home, taking care of her kids and her husband. We did not have a role outside of our home besides working. We women disliked these expectations, so we began to protest the restrictions on our lives. We wanted women's suffrage, or even just the right to vote. And that is the end of our podcast. Thank you for listening.